Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today to learn about the San Francisco Foundation's Multicultural Fellowship Program, and if it's something you're interested in applying for. Just so you know, this webinar is being recorded and you'll be hearing from the current cohort of fellows to learn about, their experience. And also if you have like any questions you want to ask directly, this is the opportunity to get some of those questions answered. So if you have any like logistical questions about like the application or deadlines, those are really going to be on the SFF webpage. And so we ask that you please use this time for really like content and experience related questions. And I think the last thing we also want to keep in mind is that the fellowship experience really does change from cohort to cohort. So please be open to the possibility of change as you listen to the experience from their current fellows. And I'll be introducing myself. My name is Alexis Lozano, she, her. I am part of one of the fellows from the 2021 through 23 cohort, and I was in the place pathway. And I can speak from that experience that this fellowship program is really a vibrant community and has over 100 alumni who have really benefited from their participation. And each cohort welcomes 4 fellows every 2 years. And this is a really long program that was established over 30 years ago and has alumni of all different backgrounds, including organizers, nonprofit leaders, small business owners, educators, elected officials, philanthropic leaders, including SFF's current CEO, Fred Blackwell. So this program is really for emerging leaders who really want to learn about how a community foundation really operates and leverages that information for an equitable Bay Area. It's also for folks that are really knowledgeable about the Bay Area nonprofit landscape and new to the philanthropic sector. It's also for folks that really have a growth mindset and want to learn about the challenges and opportunities in philanthropy and grow in their professional awareness and expose themselves to new perspectives and strategies. And it is also for people that want to do this in a cohort. So you'll be working with 4 people through your time here, and you'll have that support of the cohort and also the staff network and alumni. So with that, I am actually going to turn it over to the fellows. We're excited to have them join us today, with the exception of Casey Tran, who was the fellow on the Strategic Learning and Evaluation team who recently accepted a new position, so is not able to join us today and is now with APIP, Asian Americans Pacific Islanders in Philanthropy. And so while we miss Casey, we're thrilled to have Suki, her supervisor, in her place, who's the Senior Director of the Strategic Learning and Evaluation team. So I am going to turn it over to the fellows to introduce themselves and say a little bit more about their work and the reasons for applying for the fellowship. So I'll start with Bella.
Thank you, Alexis, for facilitating the space. My name is Bella Lopez. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Multicultural Fellow for the Power Pathway. A little bit about me. I'm originally from Southern California, and I came up to the Bay to go to San Jose State, which is so I've been in the Bay Area for about 10 years. Preliminary to joining the San Francisco Foundation, I worked at a youth leadership organization that worked across the state of California, in Washington State and Alabama, to expand and develop leadership within young people. So fundamentally, my work has been centered on the development of true authentic democracy, shifting our systems to center our community, and working with various and diverse community members. I chose applying for the fellowship and specifically the Power Pathway because I came from movement space and I really wanted to learn how to navigate, how to mobilize resources, especially in such a crucial time in our country, and with the capacity and knowledge to gain, like, how are we funding long-term movement building and developing those skills within ourselves and the folks around us. And so for me, the Power Pathway was most aligned with my previous work experience. We have specifically funded youth organizing in our work. And some of the previous fellows were also also came from youth organizing work. So that was, of course, an inclination for me. And the Power Pathway is issue agnostic and really looks at the how in the approach. And that was most aligned with my interest in terms of how we build power. And I will pass it to my colleague, Miguel.
Awesome. Thanks, Bella. Hi, everyone. My name is Miguel, pronouns he, him, and I am the Multicultural Fellow for the People Pathway. So we're broadly focused on economic equity and reimagining public safety as well as worker rights. A little bit about myself is I was born in Acapulco, Guerrero, Mexico, and I came to the US when I was 5. So I really come from a working class, low income immigrant background. So I think the issues of racial and economic equity are deeply personal to me and my family. And I've been an organizer in some capacity or another since college. And previous to the foundation, I was working at a worker center in San Francisco, La Colectiva in the San Francisco Day Labor Program, where I was a labor rights organizer from 2020 to 2022. So the funnest time known as the pandemic. So I think being there at a worker center, trying to organize low-wage workers, domestic workers, day laborers in the midst of a health crisis, really made me think through like how are organizations resourced, and how are we supporting power building organizations, worker rights organizations, to not only be able to meet the needs of their members, but also how are we sustaining their teams so they have fully stocked teams. And I think for me, the two main reasons why I applied to the fellowship is one, a living wage, as organizers in the field, in the Bay Area. As we all know, it is very difficult to find living wage jobs. So just on a practical level, that was my first thing. And then the second part was being an organizer during the pandemic and just wanting to demystify how like grant making works, how do decisions get made around who gets grants, and really wanting to be an advocate for organizers and worker centers in philanthropy. And because of the People Pathways focus on worker rights, that's what really made me gravitate towards it. And it's kind of like a full circle moment of like I worked at a worker center and I came from organizing, and now I'm the app lead for worker centers and organizers. So it's a really great feeling. Yeah. So that's my intro, and then I'll pass it to my colleague and comrade, Naila.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Miguel. My name is Naila Muntakim, she, her pronouns. I am the Place Pathway Multicultural Fellow. I am an Oakland native, born and partially raised in East Oakland. I am also one of the Black Oakland natives that was a part of the first wave of displacement that happened in Oakland. And so my experience, both lived and professionally, is very much rooted in place-based and in housing work. And so when coming back into the Bay Area, I quickly got back into housing-based organizing, and previously to my time at the fellowship, did a lot of housing-based organizing and advocacy based in West Oakland. Did everything from working in the private sector, working in housing placement, as well as building an organization from the ground up, working with both our unhoused and low-income communities within West Oakland. My reason for applying for the fellowship is though my comrades and cohort fellows were a lot more specific, for me, it was a little bit of a falling into. I was introduced into philanthropy through friends, and was told that I would be really good at it. And all I understood about philanthropy was it was the source of how my many positions came to be. I only knew that with or without a grant, I could possibly have or not have a job. And so I went into it wanting to understand how can I leverage it to not only provide more grant opportunities for the communities that I come from, for folks that look and come from the same background as me, but also to see it as a way to build stronger relationships between philanthropy and community. How can we make it less of this demystification, as Miguel talked about, from a community standpoint? And so, yeah, that's what brought me to the foundation, and I will pass it to Suki.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here with everyone. My name is Suki Leshnik. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Senior Director of Strategic Learning and Evaluation. I've been at the foundation for 4 years, and previously I was an evaluation consultant supporting nonprofits, philanthropic clients, and public agencies. A little bit about me. I was born in Laos. I'm from a family of immigrants, and I've been an evaluation professional for over 20 years. The reason I love this work is because I believe learning and evaluation is a powerful tool to uncover root causes of inequity. And in this work, I believe in the importance of context to fully understand our intentions and the results that we seek. And so I'm really excited to work with our next fellow. I'll turn it back to you, Alexis.
Thanks all. Thank you so much, fellows, for sharing. And I think it was just great to hear like the diverse background experience, and yet like also I think there's like so many common threads between all of your work too. So it's really great to see like that intersection, and hopefully gives folks a little bit more of a background about who you are, and if those experiences match at all. So I am going to go a little bit more now into some of like the information about the pathways and the programs. So going to ask some of the fellows about your work on specific teams. So if you could describe your team, so folks can have a better understanding of your team's role, how the team functions, and the work that you do on the team. So I will pass it to Bella.
Thank you. So the Power Pathway, fundamentally, our role and what we do in the foundation is support a power building approach that's aimed at winning governing power to achieve racial and economic justice. And that's how it aligns to the San Francisco Foundation's North Star. So what that looks like is fundamentally investing and partnering with communities that are aiming to shift power away from historically oppressive systems towards systems that center a new gravity that's based on reparation, authentic democracy, and repair. And so we work with a lot of community organizations doing movement building work. So while we're issue agnostic, it's really about supporting an ecosystem approach to build power and voice of our community members. In terms of the culture of the team, we're a pretty close-knit team. We work fairly integrated in our approach. We have within the Power Pathway 2 programs, our Koshland program, which develops neighborhood cohorts and leadership, and our Faiths program, which supports faith-based organizations in the region. And then, of course, our core power team. And so within that work, our team is extremely close-knit. We have a variety of experiences within the team, both within the philanthropic sector and a lot of folks who come out of community organizing and movement building space. In terms of what qualities are helpful in coming to the Power Pathway, some of the core values that I think that would help a fellow in this position are, one, coming with a willingness to learn and to jump into this work, especially as times are changing and we're all navigating uncertainty. The capacity to be a self-driver, so jumping into the work, asking questions, coming in with your own thoughts and ideas, and willingness to engage in the work, and the capacity to be a learner. So there's a variety of experiences within the team, so also coming as a learner and developing those relationships within teams. In terms of my role within the Power Pathway, one of the core responsibilities of the Power Fellow is to lead our Rapid Response Fund for Movement Building. This is a specific grant-making program at the foundation that was designed to provide short turnaround funds to frontline organizations in times of catalyzing events and emergent opportunities. And so the fellow holds this program. They work with a cross-departmental staff to train in grant-making, to do collective decision-making, and also act as a liaison to community members. So a lot of opportunities to work with folks across the foundation and be an advocate and partner for community organizations. Some other projects that I've worked on, and just prefacing to say this, is that some capacities of the work are about what your interests are and how you're coming into the position. So I came from youth organizing. Part of my role in the power team is I work with the funders table to support youth organizing in the region. I've also worked on supporting organizations and hosting convenings. The Power Pathway is doing a series of convenings on governing power. I've worked within our team to lead our refinement of our grant-making strategies to center power building. And I've also partnered with some of our other programs, including our FACE, doing participatory grant-making, as well as collaborating on a program with one of our initiatives to incorporate a power mapping exercise and power building into their work, which is advancing local housing policy, both within local government and community organizations. And I will pass it to Miguel.
Cool, thanks, Bella. So I described a little bit earlier about broadly what the people pathway strategies are. So again, quality and empower jobs and reimagining public safety. And just to reiterate Bella's point of just because I worked on workers' rights, doesn't necessarily mean that's the part of the portfolio you'll hold. And it is based on like what your interest is, what your background is, and then the team figures out collectively where to best place you. But yeah, broadly, one of my main core responsibilities is being an app lead. So it's kind of like a responsibility that a program officer would have. So you hold the key relationship between the foundation and the grantee partner. You're the one that is their communication, their bridge, and you're the one that advocates for them internally. You keep the foundation informed on the things that they're working on. You try to find additional resources when they're available for any emerging projects or things that come up unexpectedly. As you know, we've seen what's happening right now. There's a lot of organizing and power building and advocacy and policy work that needs to happen. So it's really being keeping your ears to the ground and developing relationships. It's really like relationship management. So that's the big core part of the work of like holding a part of the portfolio and really developing that relationship with those grantees. And then broadly our pathway. So we have Rework the Bay as well, which is a funder collaborative that is also focused on quality and empowered jobs. So they're supported by a collection of different funders, but it's housed in the San Francisco Foundation, and in our pathway, they do really amazing work. And then we have the hub team. So the hub team is 5 of us, so 4 people plus the fellow, so us 5, and then we hold our own side of the portfolio as well. And so that's the core part of the people pathway work, and some of the other projects I've been able to work on as a fellow that is connected, but also on its own is we have a optional second year capstone project. I chose mine to be on nonprofit staff wellness and organizational resiliency because I think for me, really trying to figure out like how do we create sustaining jobs in a nonprofit community-based organizing ecosystem? How do we move towards living wages? How do we work towards sustainable cultures? How do we support professional development? So that's a research project I did where I did literature review. I interviewed people, both funders and community partners to get their thoughts on like what are the root causes of burnout and turnover and how do we approach being able to improve retention and leadership development. So that was a really awesome project that I chose to do. And then I'm also co-chairing the Immigrant Rights Working Group. So recently we launched relaunched a working group at the San Francisco Foundation, and it's really trying to look at across the foundation, how are we looking at immigrant rights and immigrant communities, and how do we make sure that all the pathways are supporting immigrant communities. So that wasn't a part of my responsibility when I came in. That's a role I volunteered and stepped into because it's my passion, it's my background. And I had the blessing of my supervisor. So I just want to give you all a sense of like, there's like the core work you'll do with your pathway, and there's also projects and things that you volunteer for And because this is a fellowship, there is a little more flexibility and room for you to decide on some of the work that you take on while you're here. So yeah, I think I answered all the questions. And I'll pass it to Naila.
Thank you, Miguel. So yeah, the place pathway, we really believe in pushing for vibrant and thriving neighborhoods that are really deeply rooted in community. We are really into placemaking and placekeeping. And so all of those things are deeply intertwined with both people and power pathways, as well as our policy and innovation team. And so we hold a very like broad scope. And so I'll kind of touch on some like small pieces of our strategy that will help probably give more of a better understanding. And so we really deeply believe in like building local advocacy efforts, deepening prevention and preservation by having community-based ownerships or co-op ownerships or innovative ownership models. We also believe in equity-focused prevention and production, as well as strengthening BIPOC developers. And so all of our work is very much rooted in housing, but housing from a placemaking and placekeeping standpoint. And so one of the sub portfolios that live within our team is our arts and creative culture, which is held by Isalama. And another sub team is our Hope SF. Right. And so both of these, I guess, sub portfolios really come from a place-based perspective of like, how do we hold communities while also preserving the historical context that has like already been set, right? Like, how do we create these vibrant communities without totally wiping out what was there before? And so Hope SF is an initiative between the city of San Francisco and the SF Foundation and private partners that are working with the community to help build a more vibrant Bayview Hunters Point, right, from a community perspective. And so they have a small grants program where their small grant or Hope SF small grants team works in tandem with local organizations and businesses to help build a more vibrant Bayview Hunters Point. And so that is an example of some of the work that sits on that team and what we hold. The culture of the team, we're very passionate, we're a very assertive team, but we're all deeply rooted in the community. You'll find that most of us are from the Bay Area, most of us are from Oakland, most of us are from San Francisco. And if we aren't, we've been here long enough so that we have been so deeply ingrained that most of us have overlap in our personal lives. So it creates this sort of like closeness outside of this space. And so I think somebody that comes onto the team is somebody who is also deeply rooted in the community and understands that desire to preserve what was while also moving communities into a new future. Somebody who is very curious, is a self-starter, and also somebody who has opinions and also can respectfully stand on those opinions. Again, we are a very passionate and assertive team and respect when people have their opinions and stand on those opinions. Me personally, I have worked on a couple of different projects. I came in, much like my comrades and fellow fellows, came in with a specific desire around wanting to move community organizations based in West Oakland that were doing a specific kind of work to the forefront. And so I based my capstone project around wanting to move West Oakland based organizations into our grantee portfolio, as well as doing an evaluation of West Oakland and what has been previously invested in West Oakland and how that may have materialized for organizers during those time periods. Another piece of work that I've also held was sitting on our Contra Costa working group, which was a pooled fund and learning group within the foundation. And really what this was so the foundation could assess how can they learn new areas as the Bay Area is growing and as our problem focus areas are growing. How can we use place-based initiatives or place-based learning cohorts as a way for the foundation to grow collectively? And so I sat as the intermediary between the Contra Costa Working Group and the PLACE team, as well as closed out the learning evaluation that Carmela, the previous fellow from SLE, had done on how effective the Contra Costa Working Group was. And so yeah, that's pretty much what I held during my time here. And I will pass it to Suki.
Hi, everybody. So the SLE team is a dynamic and fun team of 4, including the fellow. We work at the intersection of strategy and learning to support staff across the foundation so that we can strengthen our work. Our goal as a team is to embed a learning culture through ongoing reflection and learning. And we do this in multiple ways. We analyze quantitative and qualitative data to understand our impacts. We develop tools and resources for staff so they understand how and where our resources are being deployed. And we implement practices like grantee check-ins to enable staff to deepen their relationships with our partners. And we co-develop internal performance metrics so that staff can understand their progress towards goals. The fellow works alongside the team, the SLE team, to carry out these projects throughout the year. And these projects typically involve data analysis, quantitative and qualitative, generating reports from our data management system, and providing logistics and administrative support for the team. And the fellow also helps collect internal data about our milestones, which are bodies of work that are held by staff. And the fellow also supports the staff engagement survey. In year 2, the fellow has an opportunity to work on a special project in partnership with staff and staff across the foundation and also the SLE team. Past projects have included an internal evaluation of the Contra Costa Working Group that Naila mentioned, and most recently, an assessment of the Young Koshland Scholarship Program. I want to also note that unlike the other fellows, the SLE fellow has limited opportunities to do grant making. So the focus of that fellowship is to support the SLE team and to learn about the inner workings of the foundation. So I'm going to stop there and pass it back to Alexis.
Awesome. Thank you, fellows and Suki, for sharing. Just gonna actually pass it right back to Miguel really quick to talk a little bit more about the team culture and qualities.
Yeah, I just feel bad because my team is dope. So I just want to shout out People Pathway. We're very heart-centered people. And also very deeply political and movement oriented. So, we could have a heart-to-heart convo, and we can also go super deep into like strategy and thinking about the movement ecosystem and how are we strategically funding. So yeah, just the team culture is really people who really want to do our absolute best to do right by movement and community organizations, and also very funny, warm, welcoming people. So yeah, I gotta say that.
Thank you, Miguel. And thanks again, everyone, for sharing, just like to give some insight on some of the very different and unique personalities on all the different pathways. So I am going to have some time for the fellows to give just a little bit of advice, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. So I know folks have been doing some of the questions in the Q&A, but please use that function, and then we're going to basically use the rest of the time after this to open it up to audience questions. So can someone share who is this program for, and who is it not for?
Yeah, so this program is for earlier early career professionals really looking to enter and deepen their understanding of the philanthropic field. It's not particular for someone who's more advanced in their career and may have possibly served in a position like an executive director somewhere. It's definitely for folks who are interested in a self-propelled fellowship based on learning on the job experience and engaging in team programmatic work. And I'll turn it back to you, Alexis.
Thank you. Okay, and what is important for potential applicants to know about the program that may not be clear from the job description or the website?
Sure. Thanks, Alexis. I could take that one. So I would say two main things. One, that there is flexibility to bring your own passion and interests and the issues that you and your communities care about into whatever role you come into. So yeah, just being able to think through like you're in this position of power, influence, and resources. So really bringing yourself and the communities that you represent, and think through like how do you leverage your experience and your time here to be able to mobilize resources for those communities and the organizations that are trying to support those communities. So just yeah, definitely bring yourself. Don't feel like you got to be limited to fit within a specific strategy. It's also like what is the unique perspective you bring that you can also add to the foundation. And then the other part is that when you start going out there in conferences and talking to people, people love the fellows. So yeah, come in and don't be afraid to like ask people for coffee and lunches and one-on-ones because they're gonna be excited to talk to you and learn more and share their experiences. So that's another thing. Like you're gonna get a lot of love for absolutely no reason other than just being you and being a fellow. Uh, and of course, because people know the fellows are really cool. But yeah, that's another thing that to keep in mind of, take advantage of everyone's going to want to talk to you and talk to them.
Thanks, Miguel. And last question I have is, what is the cohort experience like? I heard something about a capstone, which I think might be new to this cohort. So anything that you can share, Ayla?
Yeah, so something that I think both of my fellow fellows alluded to is that the fellowship is really what you make of it. And it can be as robust or as structured or as fluid as you need it to be. It's really about advocating for yourself, whether it be individually and collectively. And we were very much a collective advocating group. And we went into one of our meetings or came out of one of our meetings realizing we need some sort of project or something to walk away from our fellowship saying like, hey, I can speak to this directly of this work that I've done to help guide us into our new jobs and our new career paths. And so we presented it to Rakiba, and that was kind of that. And so I wouldn't say that it is the newest piece to the fellowship, but it is something that can be brought into your fellowship. And so I think reiterating what Miguel and Bella have both said is that it can be as fluid as you want it to be. And it's a great time to build relationships on all levels of the sector. In this cohort experience, I've been able to like strengthen my community-based relationships while also creating new relationships in spaces that I never thought I would be able to touch or even knew existed before. And so really take advantage because the amount of access that you have during this time period is unbelievable, to be quite honest.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to some questions we're getting in the chat. But first, I also just want to shout out to Rakiba, who is here but invisible, and also answering some questions in the chat. So Rakiba's the VP of Programs. Thanks so much for helping facilitate this conversation as well. Okay, so first question, I am going to turn over to Liz, which is, you all came from organizing / boots on the ground jobs. How have you made this a strength hopping into philanthropic work? Are there any ways in which it's represented a conflict/challenge?
This is a really great question. And I think it's one that most of us have experienced in terms of that it's always a strength and a challenge. So I lost the question, but the basis is that I think as organizers, we have really good relationships that exist on the ground. You come from have been doing the work, you know, like almost immediately. So there's an opportunity to bring deep insight from the community, to represent the interest of community, and build strategic relationships and partnerships. And also, I think some of the skills in organizing is you have the capacity to know how to talk to different people. Like, I did a lot of integrated civic engagement, knocked on doors, I worked in diverse rural communities, and that really helped prepare me to be able to speak to folks that come from different backgrounds. And also, quite frankly, I had not been as well versed in talking to folks who may come from the financial sector and or represent high wealth net individuals. And I think being able to use the skills of organizing in terms of how we talk about the work and language and adhere to the interests and values of other folks is super, super crucial. With that being said, in terms of challenges, is that this is a sector that does represent diverse interests, particularly I came from a community organization that's office was based out of a community college, and now I work in financial district in San Francisco. So there's challenges of being in a whole new different space with different parameters and protocols, and maybe coming from a smaller organization, navigating an organization of over 100 people. So there's always constant challenges. But that being said, that's a good thing. It's a good thing to be in that position and to utilize those skills and be able to navigate challenges and conflict. And there's a lot of folks who come from organizing at the San Francisco Foundation. I will say that too.
Thank you, Bella. Okay, going to next question here, which is, what are some of your challenges and learnings?
Yeah, I guess I can go. So great questions, y'all. And I won't repeat anything Bella said. But just plus oneing that there is strengths and challenges that come from, especially having come from the ground, understanding the lived realities of organizers and nonprofit leaders, and wanting to bring that urgency right sometimes to the field. I think one of the challenges is, especially if you do come from the field, like the urgency you move with of when you first come in, like you really have to build up your social capital. All right, so even if you have expertise, even if you have really important perspectives to share, like you can't skip past the importance of building relationships with people, and that it's going to take time for your thoughts and opinions to influence decision making. And that that in the beginning there's going to be a frustration of like we need to move with more urgency, but you also can't move hurriedly. So I think one of the challenges, at least for me in the beginning, was that urgency I kind of move with, and having to slow down and really take time to explain to people your thought process or where you're coming from. Not get offended when people ask follow-up questions or want more information, being able to like case make, right? So doing the case making for an organization or a project, being able to really speak to like why funding certain groups or projects is important. And the reality is, if we could fund everyone, we could, but we have a budget. You can only fund X amount of people, X amount of organizations. So there is a level of due diligence you got to do to really understand what you're advocating for, the organization you're advocating for, and understand that because you are at a larger institution, right? Sometimes the we have our periods when we make our decisions. We have our periods when we have discussion. There's like certain periods where like recommendations, thoughts are best fit, and then there's times when we need to meet deadlines. So I think those are two of the challenges of like one, being able to be patient and being able to build relationships with people, being able to like make your case and get good at making your case and not get offended if your case doesn't always win out, because that's what you're here to do, is to learn and to get better and better at it. And the other part is really learning the timeline and the cycles of the organization, and being able to like to really think through like the seasons. All right, and not every season is a grant making season, and then not every season is like a convening season. So it's really learning to move with the seasons and be strategic about when you do things. And that's gonna take like at least that first year, right? Because you're not gonna know what the cycle is like unless you go through that first year of a cycle. So yeah, definitely patience is gonna be needed.
Thanks, Miguel. And actually, I think I'm going to jump around a little bit because I think this goes into one of the other questions that we have, which was, I would like to hear more about the main differences between year 1 and year 2 of the fellowship. So if someone can answer that one.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, they always say it takes about a year to really learn philanthropy, and that's very much true. I think with this fellowship, this for the first year, though, again, I think every cohort is different, and even within those cohort, every fellow's experience is different within that fellowship. It is very much rooted around you understanding how philanthropy works, and more specifically, how philanthropy works within the foundation. You will get the opportunity to sit on the Rapid Response Fund team. Like I think we did that within our first 6 months, if I'm not mistaken, Bella. And so you'll get kind of like some hands-on experience around moving grants and like that process and doing check-ins. But that first year is really meant for you to shadow your team, to understand your team's strategy. What is the focus? Are there shifts happening in the department as a whole, or is there a shift happening on your specific team? And really kind of like absorb as much as possible. And then your second year is really about taking all of that and applying it, right? So whether that be applying it to making grant recommendations, or you have your capstone project and you have like this grandiose idea that you want to see through to the end. And it's really just taking that first year's learnings and applying it real time. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I think this has already been talked about a little bit, but does anyone want to add anything more about the capstone project and what it entails?
I can take another stab at it, and then if I leave anything out, I want to invite my colleagues to jump in. The capstone project is really very like a very fluid thing, and I want to be very clear that it is something that we specifically said that we wanted to do. And so we each have like slightly different versions of our capstone project. You know, Casey did an evaluation of a scholarship that a donor, one of the donors that major donors in our foundation does. And so she just did sort of like a learning and evaluation sort of analysis. As with like Miguel and I are doing more of like a research analysis. And then Bella is doing something a little bit more material. And Bella, please correct me if I'm wrong, if I if I misrepresent. But Bella's is a little bit more material in the sense of doing a form of power mapping with another fellowship cohort that is in relationship with the foundation, right? And so it looks very different. It's really what you are interested in and what your focus is going to be for your last year on top of your grant making. And so it's not separate from, or it is separate from your grant making and your overall day-to-day job duties, but it's in addition to what you do so that you can have something very specific to speak to when you go on to look for another job.
And quick follow-up, is there anywhere where folks can read and learn more about the capstones that you've all worked on?
I don't think so at this current time. Potentially, maybe in the future.
Potentially in the future. Okay, sounds good.
You want to add, Alexis, that most of the projects are internal projects, and so the findings are typically not shared externally.
That's good to know. Thank you so much.
Yeah, can I just add something
Yeah.
quick? The only thing I would add, and Naila did a great job, is that you also have to think through like how is your research project also helping your particular pathway and team. So always bringing it back to like how are you through this project helping your pathway become a better pathway and the foundation become a better foundation in serving the needs and its mission. So like for mine, nonprofit staff wellness, right? It's like in speaking about quality and empowered jobs, like our nonprofit jobs and the jobs of our grantee partners, like quality jobs, and how are we thinking through resourcing them so that they are. So you always want to bring back your capstone project to your pathway and also the mission and vision of the foundation, right?
Appreciate it. Okay, so going to another question here. How has the program prepared you to address the challenges working in a white dominant space like philanthropy as a BIPOC individual?
I guess I can take this one. This is a really good question, and appreciate the person who asked this. Well, I will say that the San Francisco Foundation is very intentional about an inclusive environment. And I think very lucky to be introduced into the philanthropic space, being at the San Francisco Foundation that does have an intentional North Star of racial justice and economic equity. In terms of our structure internally, we do have spaces for different BIPOC, at like cultural groups, etc. So there is collective sense of community. In terms of the field, the field of philanthropy is also changing here in the Bay Area. Of course, it is, historically white dominated space and historically has represented some levels of class divide. But the fellowship experience really has prepared me in that capacity by I'm surrounded by a team that trust and values what I say, and having that level of like being held, but also being invested in is something I think we don't talk about a lot in terms of leadership development of like what it means to have a team that trusts you, to have a team that wants you to succeed, to have a team that is really on the same wavelength. So in terms of what it's helped prepare me by is that regardless of whatever sector we're in, we're always going to face challenges. And it's really about how we center ourselves with communities and teams that are helping to uplift us. And I think that the foundation has done a good job in doing that. And there's various levels of spaces within the institution that you can build relationships with folks that come from different groups than you, and also folks that may have similar backgrounds.
Do you mind if I add something? I will also say thank you for that, Bella, and I think Bella answered it beautifully. I will say that also outside of the opportunities that the fellowship provides, puts you in spaces that don't necessarily look like the foundation. And so reiterating the fact that like the foundation is very much a representation of what they're moving towards. There were, I will say personally, times where I would go into other spaces and I'd be like, oh, wow, this is so different than the San Francisco Foundation. But it also taught me to be confident in like my experience. And I think I have like my team and my fellows to like give credit to for that, of realizing like we are in a very robust experience here. And the reason why we're here is because of our knowledge and because of our experiences. And so it let me know that like it was something that I didn't have to focus on as much, rather than I just had to figure out how to make it a leverage point rather than sort of like a defect, I guess you could say. But yeah.
And if I can just add one last thing, I feel like it's also like what the purpose of the fellowship is and why it started, right? Is the lack of opportunities for people of color to break into the field, or people from disadvantaged backgrounds or low income backgrounds. So it's literally why I was born, is to have more representation in the field. So as folks said, the field is changing, but there's still a lot of change needed, and you coming in is part of that change. So just keep that in mind. And also that, we are a community foundation, so I think community foundations are a little better at kind of trying to reflect the background and communities that we're representing. But yeah.
Yeah, that was a hard one. Thanks everyone for kind of answering it, and giving your thoughts. I think we're getting some questions in here, and that might be answered in the chat, but I actually think could be good too to hear your thoughts, which is what are like the opportunities for like collaboration amongst like both the cohort and more broadly. I think most of you have kind of touched on this a little bit, but I think we're getting a few questions about that. So if anyone wants to share additional information about what that looks like.
I can, sorry, did you want to go, Bella?
Go ahead.
Okay. I actually am going to speak about a time in which Bella and I actually collaborated. There's a lot of room within the cohort to collaborate amongst each other. One, the pathways are already, there's so much overlap. They are separate into 3 pathways, but they all intertwine, and we know these things to be very connected. There is a natural symbiotic relationship between those 3. And then having the multicultural fellows that spend a lot of time with each other, it only creates another chasm, or not chasm, excuse me, space for us to create and collaborate. But one of the things that we worked on is trying to move funds to some organizations that were doing some work with Palestine and Gaza. And, Bella and I decided that like, hey, like, let's see how we can help folks apply for rapid response funds. And so through relationships and, late nights, working together, we were able to like get some applications put together and really do something like very specific around like moving some rapid funds during that time period where organizing was kind of like at an all-time high. Another version of that is like organizations that wanted to, that were doing a lot of work towards like encampment closures in Oakland. It didn't really get to like move in the direction that we wanted to, but we used our relationship amongst each other as well as our relationship with organizations outside of the space to really kind of think about like, what would it look like for Rapid Response Fund to provide rapid response grants for organizations that are doing direct service work in that way. So there's a lot of opportunities. You just kind of have to, like, going back to the curious base piece, you have to be curious, you have to be like ready to kind of like respond at a moment's notice sometimes, while also being as thoughtful as possible. Yeah.
I can add a couple other components. So there's professional development opportunities that also coincide with the work that we do. So for example, the fellows as a cohort have met with several like leaders in the field, done conversations, informal interviews. We participated in some cohorts. So we did a cohort through an organization called Northern California Grantmakers, professional development opportunity called New Grantmakers Institute. We also did one that focused on C4 and power building work. So there were learning experiences that we had together. We have met about bi-weekly in terms of doing debriefs, learning about what each other's work are doing, how can we support each other. And then the Power Fellow does hold the Rapid Response Fund work, but for the first 6 months of it, the fellows are the other committee members, and it's really an introduction into grant making. So you'll have an initial opportunity to utilize that as a learning experience, an opportunity to collaborate and work with each other.
Thanks for sharing. And just noting the time here, we're coming up on 5 minutes left. So if we did not get to your question, I apologize. And I think questions, if you have a question directly for someone on a pathway, you can email them directly, or you can email is it fellowships@sff.org, general questions. But noting that right now, because I want to kind of wrap it up with like one last question for the fellows, which is how has this program catalyzed your future steps, and what are you excited to work on in the future? And I'm actually going to add like one more on. It's like, if you have like any advice to folks that are wondering, you know, if this is the fellowship for me, like any advice that you would have. And then I will wrap it up with the closing and close out the webinar.
I can start this one. I think there was a couple questions, so I might not get to all of them. But so when I applied to the fellowship, I actually came into the field with a very specific goal, which was I want to eventually be a program officer. So I think a lot of what happened with my experience was, how do I build the skills and get the experience needed to be a competitive hire for program officer roles? Not everyone needs to be that specific, but I think for me, this fellowship was very helpful in that. So I came in and talking to my supervisor, Anand, I was like, hey, I want to be a grant maker. I want to be a program officer. And he was very helpful in helping me figure out like, what are the trainings I need to do, the conferences I need to go in, how can I hold a part of the portfolio so that I can have that on my resume. So I would say that it's definitely helped me, and I'm trying to stay in the field and be a rising star program officer, hopefully somewhere. And I do feel like this experience has built up my confidence and that I can make an impact in the field and bring that community organizing experience here. And I think I'm just grateful that I was part of the People Pathway, where everyone was super supportive, and they have helped me become a strategic thinker and a good grant maker. And so I think, really use that first year to, you don't have to have a super concrete idea. Like really use that first year to just talk to people. Have as many one-on-ones as you can, like not just with people in your pathway across the foundation, with people that you're meeting in the field. If you find someone interesting at a conference, be like, hey, can we have a one-on-one or a coffee? And just take that first year to talk to a bunch of people, and don't pigeonhole yourself into something. And just be open to, you start off in this fellowship and maybe like Alexis, you go into working in the public sector, right? Or maybe you come in through one of our pathways, but really you get excited about doing marketing and communications, and you find out you're really super into communication work. So really come in. I would say being open to what your trajectory could be afterwards. But use that first year to think about it, and then use that second year to how do you use the remaining time of your fellowship to help you get to a place that you want to. Yeah.
Thanks, Miguel. Anyone else want to add anything?
I think what I would add is just highlighting Miguel's point, like coming into the fellowship, I would really recommend folks to take some time to reflect on like what their vision and what they're intentionally trying to get out of it. It's different for everybody. And that's why the experience changes, because we're all different people. We have different experiences, backgrounds, and understandings. I think some of the really amazing opportunities are the relationships you can develop, working with diverse leaders across the field. For example, I was on a call on Wednesday with 10 community organizations. Yesterday, I was in a room of 20 financial advisors. So there's various amounts of opportunities to engage with different types of folks. And you have to lean into those opportunities. It's a self-propelled fellowship. And so it's really about what am I coming into this with intention to do? What is my vision? And how do I want to leave this, and what skills do I want to have? And having that as a core, will really help guide the fellowship for you.
A great way to end it. Thanks to everyone again for joining and getting a little bit more information about the Multicultural Fellowship Program and what you might expect. I think exactly like what was said, it's going to be a unique experience every time because it's different folks and it's a different time, a different place. We're entering a very different sort of environment right now as well. So it is a really unique time to probably to be in philanthropy. And if you have specific questions for the fellows, as I mentioned, you should be able to find emails on the website. If you go to the sff.org website and go to the team page and you click on folks on their bios, there should be people's emails there. And for general questions, the fellowships at sff.org, which I think will be monitored as well. So we can get back to folks about that. And I think just remember the deadline to apply is March 7th at 11:59 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So get in the applications, and I think we look forward to reviewing them. And thanks so much, everyone, for the time.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Thanks, Alexis.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Everybody.